Right, so next on the agenda is Marlin and a Death Dealer. And hopefully it sticks around for at least a little while, right? Azalea doesn't LL too quick. Although, you can always take it a blitz, right? Death Dealer with Azalea, or thanks to Azalea, should be in blitz for quite a while. So yeah, Death Dealer in Marlin, either blitz or classic constructed, looks to be quite the blast. But, first off, how does she compare? So Azalea, once per turn action, 0 cost, put a card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck. If you do, put the top card of your deck face up into your arsenal. If it's an arrow, it gets dominate. So the whole idea there is you're basically building towards one big arrow, right? So your Death Dealer, although in Marlin counts essentially as 2 arrows. For Azalea, it counts as an arrow that you can then cycle away if need be, or a bolt and shot if you want to chain the arrows together, and then a card to pump or a card to pitch, right? With the draw effect of Death Dealer. Riptide will just tuck him away, right? So he loads, but not as well as Marlin, it seems. So he loads when you play a card, Marlin loads when she draws a card. Drawing a card means you're not going negative off the load, so yeah, it's just frankly better. But Marlin, right? Whenever you draw a card during the action phase, you may put an arrow from your hand face up into your arsenal. So, again, equipment-wise, with Death Dealer, once per turn action, pay 1. If you have no cards in your arsenal, put an arrow from your hand face up into your arsenal. If you do, draw a card. If you draw a card as Marlin, you get to put another arrow into your arsenal, right? So, as long as we have New Horizon with the 2 arsenal slots, Death Dealer is essentially load 2 arrows, which is essentially working towards this really go wide build. Not maybe as intense as what Lexi could do, right? With a flip of lightning, gain go again, and then just the lightning package in general. But we also have Sealace Sarong to tie it all together. As an instant tap, turn a blue arrow in your arsenal face up, and it gets go again this turn. So, using all of these equipment pieces in conjunction with Marlin, what we can basically set up and achieve is sort of this string, right? Where we have Marlin, we have our Sealace Sarong. It flips a blue arrow. That blue arrow now is go again, so it can be a debilitating arrow, but it essentially forces our opponent to at least block a little bit, right? We then, with New Horizon and Death Dealer, load 2 more arrows, with one of those arrows hopefully being a go again, and then the other arrow being another debilitating arrow, right? So we go debilitating blue, go again, debilitating, right? So this sense of going wide instead of, say, Azalea with dominates and a debilitating arrow. So the crux of the matter there is we should somewhat be pushing equivalent damage to Azalea, but because we're spreading out the debilitatingness, right, we're getting more cards out of our opponent's hand. So the debilitating effects that we land don't have to be as debilitating as Azalea. I still think Azalea probably trumps this style of Marlin, right? You really have to high roll turn after turn after turn to just get sort of the same pace, right? Because once Azalea starts dominating, she just dominates, literally, right? So it's still a really, really fun package to try and figure out because basically we have some slots, right? So again, blue into go again, into debilitate, right? Nice and simple. So in essence, that's 1 card in arsenal, 1 card in hand, 1 card drawn off of Death Dealer, and therefore all we need is a pitchable, and we have 2 other card slots free. So what this enables us to do, right, rather than just, well, it could just be pumping, but we could essentially, go for some utility, go for some buffing, or go for some actual defensive play. So we can still take the lace cards, seek and destroy, all the other pumps that Azalea generally runs, right? Our +3s. We have a bit more flexibility because we can stick it on any of our arrows, so to speak, right? If we really want to hit breakpoints with the first blue arrow, we can do so. If we have a pump in hand, if we want to, spread out again the damage that we're trying to inflict, we could try and put a debilitating effect on our go again arrow, or we could just stack it at the tail end with that final arrow that we're trying to land. Utility-wise, we have a card like Line, which, again, if we're going in a really arrow-focused deck, is actually kind of a solid inclusion. So it's either a blue pitchable, it's still a 3-block, which is one of the premiums over a lot of the buffing cards, right? The buffing cards majority have just 2-block. So look at the top card of your deck. If it's an arrow, you may put it face up into your arsenal. If you do, it gets go again, so that could essentially try and add an extra arrow to our turn. And then a card, of course, like Return Fire, right, or even Chain Reaction, depending on the synergy. When this defends, you may banish an arrow from your hand. If you do at the start of your turn, put it face up into your arsenal, and it gets +3 until the end of turn. So, you will have to refresh my memory, but I believe you don't get a priority window, right, at the start of your turn. This would just resolve, so for instance, you wouldn't be able to at instant Sarong at the start of your turn to make Return Fire land in your arsenal. But if that's not the case, do correct me, because then that does change my perspective and makes Return Fire even that much better. But generally speaking, obviously, you could take, again, some more defense reactions, stick them in the arsenal, and have Return Fire just as a way to bloat a equivalent turn to when we're trying to string together a whole set of arrows. So, again, to sum up, we have our arsenal, debilitation, we have the pitch ball, we have our go again arrow into hopefully drawing another arrow, right? So then we have those extra slots to really try and put something together. So yeah, I do think the package is going to be pretty solid, but it's just that fun part of tinkering with it and trying to get all the numbers correct, right? How many blues, how many go again arrows, how many pumps. So let's take a crack. So before we dig into the arrow jumble, right, let's start with equipment. So again, head, nice and easy, New Horizon, since we want to benefit off of the second arrow with Death Dealer and its draw mechanics. So Death Dealer as our bow, New Horizon as our headpiece. That just leaves everything but the legs, because again, I'm pretty sure it's wrong, just auto-include. Just an extra blue arrow on top of your turn. Seems great, right? So chest-wise, we have our Trench of Sunken Treasure or our Farandel Spring Tunic. Farandel Spring Tunic, obviously just a free resource every 3 turns, versus Trench as a way to clear the arsenal if we get a little bit gunked up. So I do actually like Trench of Sunken Treasure for that reason, right? So if we don't land the blue arrow to use with Sarong, we have basically the free resource for Death Dealer, right? And we can sort of salvage our turn a little bit. But at the same time, we shouldn't really be starving for resources, right? Because we're going to try and take a blue-heavy deck. But yeah, I think we'd get more procs out of Trench than we would the 3-turn wait for Spring Tunic. So potentially I'm more towards Trench, right? Then for the arms, interesting picks. So I don't think we'll have any difficulty loading, but obviously Bullseye just as an extra load, right? A pump for Bolt and Shot is always just fantastic. Again, it's just adding that extra arrow to our sequence, maybe. So, you know, it's stock standard with a lot of Ranger builds. Glide, well, Fins. It does have that resource cost, but it's essentially the same thing as Bullseye with the Battle Worn, so it's also a little bit nice, but, you know, again, we have to really work out the resources. 1 goes in Death Dealer, and most likely 2 goes into other arrows, because there's not a whole bunch of debilitating zero-cost arrows, right? Long Draw Half Glove as payoff for something like 3 of a Kind definitely works. It has the Battle Worn again, so it's defensive. So maybe Bullseye for the Arcane matchups, Long Draw for the defensive matchup, something like that. And then the odd pick, hear me out, Van Brace of Determination. It's a reusable attack reaction for the arrows. There are, well, I actually know the premium on damage prevention is going down, right? Especially with Enigma Gaunt, so maybe it's not that fantastical, but still, it's, again, if we have those resources spare, it is something that could be just added on extrally, right? That could be somewhat decent, right? But most likely it's Bullseye or the Glidewell Fins would be my top guess, right? Well, why am I saying guess? We're building the deck. I should say pick, right? Yeah, I would pick Bullseye or the Glidewell Fins, right, in the initial testing. So arrows, we'll start with the go-against, right? So Bolt and Shot, Rainbow, nice and easy. They do require the pump in order to give it go again, but that shouldn't be too difficult. For instance, if we have the blue, we can still arsenal and still get benefit out of our Sea Lace Sarong. It's just trying to, you know, chip away a little bit extra damage. Otherwise, yeah, the yellow and the red both need some sort of pump, but we should be running enough pumps that it's not too bad. And again, in conjunction with our Bullseye or Glidewell Fins, it's that easy extra arrow to add to the sequence. Falcon Wing is 0 cost go again, so think of this as just, again, that little extra bit of chip damage where your opponent's prepared to block out the debilitating arrow, so they're letting the chip damage across, right? Sikkim Shots, 1 cost go again, so a little bit more rough, because again, that would push our sort of budget to 4 resources, right? Death Dealer, debilitating arrow, go again, debilitating arrow, right? So 1 resource short for that, but it's still workable. Swift Shot, the new good one from SEAS itself. So when this is put into your arsenal, it gets go again this turn, right? As long as it's put face up, but we're loading his face up through Death Dealer or Marlynn, so it works, right? And yeah, question is just the coloring. So I do like Falcon Wing as yellow, because again, with the +3, wait, no. That should be blue for the argument I'm about to make, because again, we want to hit more blues. So what I was going to say is Falcon Wing with the +3 hits that breakpoint, right? We don't need the yellow. So I think that's what I like. So again, full Bolt and Shot, and then reds and blues of arrows that we can take, right? Swift Shot doesn't unfortunately have a blue, otherwise it would be really, really nice. So yeah, so that's our basis of go again. And the idea here is we're obviously trying to find one of them every single turn. So more than 15 is generally what we want if we're taking a 60-card deck, because theoretically that's 1 in 4, right? Then the other arrows. So this is the first big hurdle. What do we cut, and how many blues do we actually want, right? So there is merit to the 0-cost arrows, right? Like Dry Powder Shot. When it's put into your arsenal face up, it gets +2 this turn. So it's a cheaper version of Headshot, and again, allows us to work in something like Falcon Shot. Otherwise, mostly every other arrow is 1 cost, right? Aside from Endless Arrow. So it's just which debilitating effects are worth taking. and obviously how many blues do we also want to take to back it up. Because again, the idea is we want 1 blue arrow to arsenal, and most likely 1 blue to pitch. So generally speaking, we need half our deck to be blue, right? And we can get away with the go again arrows, adding to our blue, so there's 9 there, right? And then another 12, 15, 18, 21, 30. So I'm at the right amount of blues, so yeah. So it's just about cutting out the other reds, because we are already over 60 cards. And then, of course, it's the filler pieces, right? The pumps and everything else. So there are some very, very interesting choices. Yeah, obviously we have our laces, our premeditate, seek and destroy, release the tension, right? The good old stock standard Ranger stuff. But if we're aiming for 3 arrows a turn, right? Rain Razors should effectively be a +6, making it really good, right? Poison the Tip, again, if we're spreading out arrows, all hopefully achieving awkward breakpoints, then Poison the Tip should be decent. Plus, the reload is a face down, so that in conjunction with our Sarong can allow us to give a blue go again, or if we do take Trench, gain a resource, right? So I do like the reload proc with Sarong. Then the interesting one you might notice, so Charter Course. Second attack this turn gets +3, or the third attack this turn gets +3. So the ability to take a blue +3 or a yellow +3 to me is really, really nice, right? So I'm probably leaning to definitely the yellow, because I'd say confidently we should be able to get to 2 arrow turns easily. So a yellow +3 is beautiful, but part of me wants to take the blue, just to make it a little bit easier again to find the blue turns that we want, right? Aside from that, we already went over line, so look at the top card of our deck. As long as we're taking majorly arrows, this should have a decent chance of hitting, and just adding an extra arrow to our attack string, right? Sunken Treasure, being a blue 3 block, is really nice, can also help us get gold. Gold, again, maybe adds to an extra arrow, or at the very least allows us to float resource and try and find the pieces that we really want, right? 3 of a kind as well, again, a whole bunch of arrows. If we're taking enough go again, this either leads to something like our long draw half glove, if we take that as a big pump, a bunch of resources to spill over into other things, or again, just making sure we hit the targets we want to hit. Now, chain reaction, right? In a dream world, obviously, you go chain reaction into 3 of a kind. That is a little bit awkward to me, because A, you have to get the go again proc, B, you have to have 3 of a kind in your arsenal, and ideally, we're setting up a blue arrow most turns to use with our arsenal instead. So I think chain reaction probably doesn't quite cut it, but return fire definitely does. And I would say overall, it's the total number of these pumps, right? How many do I actually want to take? So again, it should be somewhere under 15. So let me prune and tinker and then see what we come up with. Right, so here's the 60 cards so far, right? So the buffs we ended up going with premeditate, so it's a big one, right? It's obviously really, really good with wide and ranger in general. So next time an attack action card hits a hero this turn, create a ponder token. So since we're going wide, and that's a prolonged effect, beautiful. And then the next attack action card you play from arsenal, all our arrows are played from arsenal. It's also really, really nice, right? Along with that, Rain Razors at 2, Charter Course at 2, and Line at 2. So Line gives any arrow we hit with it go again, so as long as we do hit an arrow, it's just an extra arrow onto the sequence, right? Which could, again, get a little bit rough depending on the cost of the arrow, but should be an extra 3 or 4 damage, right? And maybe a decent effect to go along with it. Return fire as a nice little block and a buff, again, might be a little bit awkward if our arsenal is filled, right? There is the scenario of, for instance, you could trench something just to clear it for return fire. So you could use trench to play around arsenal destruction and then return fire to still set something up, right? There's something to that, right? Other than that, Codex is missing from the list, so I don't think it's necessary. Obviously, Codex of Frailty is just really, really good, right? But I don't think it's necessary in Go Wide Marlynn, in Harpoon Marlynn. It's definitely really, really strong, right? So it could find its way into this list, especially as a yellow, but for now, I don't think it's as necessary. Obviously, the Ponder is really, really helpful too, right? The Frailty, and then obviously the find a specific arrow, especially if we're emptying our hand or have already loaded, and that way we don't actually have to worry about the discard. Could definitely be really, really nice, right? Could also, well, no, because it loads, no, it is face down, right? So it could also salvage our following turn and give us a blue arrow, right? So we could go again, non-go again. I'm talking myself into running Codex, and I like having a decent list, but obviously, when I say decent, I mean cheap, but I'm, tacting my words, right? New Horizon is obviously quite expensive, so yeah, keep that in mind. But other than that, the arrows, right? I think it's the sweet spot, right? 25 blues, so we should be happy most of the time with our blues. Probably a dead draw here or there. That's fine. That's fine. That's fine so far. 2 a turn. 1 a turn. There we go. Means we wouldn't be able to set up for a following turn if we're pitching this unless we then draw into a blue. No, it was return fire. But salvage, because return fire then sets up the bolt and shot for the next turn. Pitch, Rain Razors, and then powder shot. Right? So yeah. It seems pretty solid. Again, it's just tweaking the numbers and which cards are actually, again, more impactful. Because I have the other, debilitating effects, Lace and Frailty, Blood Rod and Frailty, right? Second Stroke should probably be in there, right? Chain Reaction again, questionable. Poison Tip, questionable, but, again, going 3 arrows wide, Poison Tip definitely has decent value to it. Stunning Treasures for the gold would be nice, but not necessary. And then Release Attention, solid choice as well. The other thing to probably talk about in that sense is when Death Dealer goes, right? The obvious change is probably Dreadball. With Dreadball, you're not getting that extra arrow, so it's basically just blue into big, right? In which case, Azalea with Sarong would be stronger, but Azalea's LL. So yeah, I would say Dreadball replaces Death Dealer and still a solid deck, right? Again, blue debilitating into big, other debilitating, or split up the buff, so both arrows are debilitating. Sarong is just super good, right? So yeah. Work in progress. I will put the link in the description, and any card choices or tips and advice are always welcome. Other than that, hope you enjoyed, right? Hopefully you're having some fun too, tinkering with the High Seas cards, right? And the new deck possibilities. Yeah.